The distress beacon blinked through the void, a pulse of white against the black silence, and every ship on the outer fringe of Sector 9 registered it at once. The crew of the Helian Rise debated protocol, but Captain Narine gave the order to divert course as soon as the coordinates confirmed a stranded vessel. They were eager to respond, desperate for action after weeks of drifting on patrol. When they arrived, the ship was dead in space, unmarked, unlit, and massive. A relic or a prototype, none of them could tell it. Hovered in a slow spin, its hull scarred and ancient, looking as though time itself had gnawed on its edges. And though no message followed the beacon, the crew saw it for what it must be, a cry for help. The Helian Rise hailed the vessel on all frequencies. No reply came, just static. And silence. A silence that did not feel empty, but watched the pilot. Coral initiated docking protocol and magnetic clamps secured them to the husk of the strange craft. Lieutenant Shen and Medic Brava suited up their breath. Echoing loud in the still prep bay, Captain Narine stood at the airlock reading sensor data, but nothing made sense. No life signs, yet no decay. No radiation, yet deep interference. The ship itself seemed to resist scans as though wrapped in static. The airlock slid open, not from their override, but on its own, and within it was only darkness. Lights flickered on instinctively as they entered, casting cold beams through a corridor that looked grown, not built. The walls were smooth and pulsing with veins of faint bioluminescence. The floor swallowed the sound of their steps, and no dust marred the surfaces. Brava kept checking her med scanner, but it gave only errors, while Shen marked their path with infrared chalk. They passed doorways that led nowhere, chambers that looked like altars, and ceiling ducts that whispered with unseen breath. Something about the silence felt shaped, deliberate. The beacon had come from deep within. And the crew pressed forward, certain someone had to be alive. They found the first body upright and unmoving, eyes open, yet blind, fused into the wall by strands of fibrous matter, its mouth still stretched in a final scream that never ended. Brava backed away, hands shaking, while Shen aimed his rifle at the shape out of reflex. Though it did not move, and never could, the corridor ahead branched into a vast chamber, at the center of which hovered a core of amber light crackling. Inside it was a figure curled in fetal posture, skin translucent and twitching despite the lack of pulse. Brava whispered that it was alive, and Narine reached out. But the instant his fingers touched the amber, it melted open, and the thing fell gasping onto the floor. It was not human, but it looked close, too close. Skin like glass, eyes without whites, limbs wrong by degrees, but still mimicking form. It coughed and then screamed, a noise that echoed through the ship, and all at once the walls reacted, veins brightening, chambers shifting, as though the vessel had awoken and knew they were there. Shen tried to backtrack, but the corridor behind them closed like muscle, and lights began to dim. Then Surge Red Brava yelled that the scanners were flooding with signals that things were waking in the walls, and Captain Narine gave the order to retreat, but the ship did not allow it. Doors melted into the walls, escape paths folded away, and the corridors stretched behind them, looping in impossible geometry as if the ship were rewriting its own blueprint. Shen fired at a panel, but the blast was swallowed. The wall healing over in seconds. The rescued thing stood now, eyes blank, head tilted, and then it spoke with a voice that echoed from every surface. It said they had answered the call, and now they belonged here. Brava collapsed from neural feedback, screaming and clutching her skull, while Narine dragged her forward, demanding answers, demanding reason. But the ship answered only with sound, a deep, mechanical breathing that was not from any engine. In the central chamber a new core had grown, and from it emerged figures, more of them blank-eyed and identical to the first. They moved in unison, speechless and precise. The ship had been calling for a long time, they learned. Calling for patterns it could digest and mimic, calling for shapes it could use. They were not rescuing anything. They were specimens to be copied, to be learned from, to be consumed not in flesh but in form. Shen stood his ground, and fired again and again as the core pulsed and grew. But his rounds meant nothing against walls that remembered and adapted, and the figures began to walk forward, not with threat, but inevitability. The Helian rise detached from the vessel hours later, not by the will of its crew, but by command of the ship itself, drifting lifeless and dark. Now, its systems purged, its memory wiped, its logs empty. It returned to patrol routes under perfect autopilot, with a full crew registered on board, all biosins normal. Yet something in the way the ship moved was wrong. Not wrong in function, but in rhythm. As though it now pulsed with a different mind. When a salvage team intercepted days later, they opened the rise expecting answers, and found the crew alive, smiling, silent, standing at attention in a perfect line. And when the salvage ship docked, the rise opened wide to welcome them in. From the salvage vessels, bridge technician Huro watched as the Helian rises airlock yawned wide like a mouth of metal. And Shadow, the boarding team, stepped inside, responding to what they thought was standard protocol. Nothing, screamed nothing. Warned only, welcome, lights blinking in sequence, a heartbeat rhythm flowing through the walls. But Huro noticed something. The ship was transmitting again, a new beacon on a frequency ancient to be standard, too layered to be human. She filtered it through translation software, and the message resolved into 5 words that chilled her blood. She turned to warn the crew, but the comms cut out and the lights dimmed, and from the viewport she saw it, the rise's engines igniting on their own, not escaping, but aiming directly for the heart of civilization. It had learned, it had practiced, and now it would multiply. The ship, once a rescuer, now a seed, carrying perfect replicas with hollow smiles and empty eyes, spreading not infection but mimicry. And behind it, the stars blinked one by one, as if winking shut to never open again. They thought it was a rescue. It was a beginning. And now, it was everywhere,